when Hollywood's spotlights hid birth certificates. Fame in the Golden Age was polished to a blinding sheen, yet some of its brightest stars began life in the shadows, branded illegitimate, shuffled between foster homes, or denied a father's name. Their journeys from whispered scandal to studio royalty proved that a birth secret can forge unbreakable drive. Tonight we open the dossier on 8 legends who crashed the gates of classic Hollywood despite the cruel stigma of being illicit children. Marilyn Monroe. No studio press agent could outspin Norma Jean's first line of biography, father unknown. Abandoned at 2 weeks old when her mother, Gladys, spiraled into psychosis, she ping-ponged through a dozen foster beds, clutching a photo of a smiling stranger Gladys insisted was daddy. The absence cut so deep that she invented fathers on cue, an English gentleman for one reporter, a heroic Hollywood hand for another, anything to quiet the playground taunts of bastard. Modeling money bought her first apartment but not belonging. She kept a suitcase packed in case the landlord learned she was an unwed 16-year-old bride. Stardom gave her new names, Monroe, the blonde bombshell. Yet every role was haunted by the faceless man she prayed would clap from the balcony. In 2022, DNA finally confirmed insurance salesman Charles Gifford as that phantom parent, decades after he'd slammed a door in her face. The revelation couldn't save her, but it does explain the aching father-daughter fantasies that surface in films from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes to The Misfits. A woman forever auditioning for paternal love in front of the world. Steve McQueen. Terrence Stephen. McQueen hit the world at St. Francis Hospital, Indiana, an accidental souvenir of an alcoholic wanderer and a circus pilot father who ditched mother and son 6 months later. With no wedding band to soften the gossip, Julia Crawford farmed him out to Missouri relatives, where that bastard boy worked fields for supper and dodged beatings from stepfathers who reminded him he had no name worth a damn. At 9, he stole to eat. At 12, a judge shipped him to reform school. There, the illegitimate loner discovered speed, first a red tricycle, then stolen Harleys. Finally, the U.S. Marines, where discipline felt like respect. Hollywood loved his outlaw cool, but insiders knew the chip was real. He kept a gold pocket watch from Uncle Claude engraved, "To Steve, who has been a son to me," the closest thing he ever had to a legal paternity claim. Even at the pinnacle, $1 million per picture, his pick of scripts, McQueen slept with a loaded pistol beneath hotel pillows, still the unwanted kid guarding his corner. When cancer felled him at 50, he asked evangelist Billy Graham to confirm that God adopts bastards too. Anna Magnani. Born in Rome's charity ward in 1908, Anna never knew her father's name, only the dagger label Figlia Naturale thrust onto every school register. Her seamstress mother fled to Egypt, leaving the love child to a grandmother who raised her in a drafty Trastevere tenement where cats outnumbered coins. Anna fought taunts with volume. She belted street songs until cobblestones echoed, then traded them for lines at Rome's Academy of Dramatic Arts, paying tuition by crooning in smoke-choked nightclubs. War-scarred neo-realist directors found her scars authentic. Bombs still fell when Rome, Open City, set her on fire. Hollywood tried to sand her edges, but the outlaw blood that once shamed her powered a 1955 Oscar for the rose tattoo. Illegitimate, she winked to reporters, better illegitimate than insignificant. Alec Guinness. Born in 1914 to the unmarried Agnes Cuff, Alec spent his first summers shuttling through seaside boarding houses where landladies whispered bastard behind teacups. His mother, a volatile drinker who kept the name of his father a riddle, perhaps a Scottish banker called Andrew Geddes, perhaps a passing sailor, could offer little more than clipped affection and constant flight from rent collectors. Alec learned early to vanish inside stories. He devoured Dickens beneath draft-whistling staircases and copied the precise diction of BBC announcers to erase the Cockney hints that drew playground sneers. At 14, he forged his own scholarship form to escape to the Fay Compton School of Acting. When the headmaster discovered the prank, he admired the boy's audacity and passed the hat for tuition. Fame did not still the ache of belonging. On London stages, he morphed restlessly, from comic valet to Shakespearean tyrant, while scanning faces in the stalls for a man who shared his chin. Hollywood crowned him with an Oscar for The Bridge on the River Kwai, but even on that triumphant night, he dodged the governor's ball to telephone Agnes, terrified she might reveal some fresh scandal. Guinness's legendary invisibility, the way he let characters eclipse himself, was, friends believed, the survival trick of a boy who had once been told he had no legal right to a name. Only in late memoirs did he admit the wound outright, writing, "My illegitimacy taught me politeness. I never felt entitled to disturb the air others breathed." Jackie Cooper. Los Angeles, 1922. John Jackie Cooper arrived without a marriage license to bless him. His salesman father bolted when the boy was 2. Mother Mabel hustled piano gigs while Studio Gates sneered at unaffiliated bastards. Jackie crashed them anyway, playing ragamuffins in our gang's shorts before nabbing an Oscar nod at 9 for Skippy, still the youngest Best Actor nominee in history. Yet the stigma stalked him. Playground bullies hissed no name, and MGM publicity kept Dad's desertion hush-hush to preserve the wholesome image. Cooper channeled the ache into military discipline, earning a Navy commission in World War II and later steering MASH episodes from the director's chair. The child nobody claimed became, at 17, president of Screen Actors Guild, proof that a missing surname can't sink a born commander, Sophia Loren. Sophia Villani Ciccolone entered the world in a charity ward outside Naples in 1934, an illegitimate war baby whom nurses nicknamed La Figlia Senza Padre, the fatherless girl. Her mother, Romilda Villani, was a Greta Garbo lookalike seduced by aristocrat Riccardo Ciccolone, who refused both marriage and child support. In strict Catholic Italy, the stigma was merciless. Classmates jeered, priests tut-tutted, and food coupons came last to single-mother households. Sophia slept 5 to a mattress, drank watered wine to dull hunger, and once took shrapnel to the chin while sheltering in a railway tunnel during Allied bombings. She hid the scar beneath a strategic beauty mark. At 15, she wore curtains refashioned into a gown for the Queen of the Sea pageant, losing the crown but winning a third-class rail ticket to Rome. There, producer Carlo Ponti became mentor, lover, and, in her words, the father who chose me. Hollywood at first dismissed her as too Mediterranean, but an Italian Oscar for 2 women forced the studios to notice. Yet success could not buy legitimacy. Her biological father reappeared merely to sell letters, and gossip columns mocked her bastardy during the Ponti marriage scandal. Loren answered with dignity, sending money to the Pozzuoli school that once shamed her and founding a shelter for unwed mothers. Today she recalls the taunts not with bitterness but pride. "They called me illegitimate. I became indomitable." Anthony Newley, Hackney, 1931. Air raid sirens and gossip about fatherless Tony scored his childhood. Francis Newley's boyfriend vanished before the birth certificate dried, so the boy grew up in foster rooms, mourning a ghost dad he'd never met. Blitz evacuations dumped him with retired music hall performer George Pescud, who taught the shy evacuee to project pain into song. By 17, Newley stole Oliver Twist as the Artful Dodger. By 30, he topped UK pop charts with Why and co-wrote the musical Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. Fame banked money but not legitimacy. Interviewers pried about his illicit origins, and Newley masked hurt with manic on-stage patter. In his 60s, he finally met the builder who claimed paternity, quipping, "Better late than never, Dad. I've saved you a box seat." Faye Marlowe. Hollywood press kits called her the Silver Screen Cinderella, but birth records listed only baby girl Simon, illegitimate. Abandoned by an alcoholic father, the 18-month-old was adopted by showbiz impresario Fanchon Simon, who drilled poise into every pirouette. At 19, Faye landed a 20th Century Fox contract during wartime's actress shortage, debuting opposite John Payne in Follow the Sun. Still, directors barked illegit behind sets, and gossip scribes framed her romances as proof of inherited, wayward blood. When studio roles dwindled after 30, Faye reinvented herself as author Faye Houston, penning a memoir that praised her adoptive parents and forgave the man who'd vanished. Her quiet second act reminds us that some stars shine brightest once the marquee lights dim. Judy Lewis. Conceived on a snowy mountain set during Call of the Wild 1935, Judy entered the world as the secret daughter of Catholic sweetheart Loretta Young and married King of Hollywood Clark Gable. To dodge ruinous scandal, studio fixers hid the pregnancy, parked the newborn in an orphanage, then staged Loretta's charity adoption. Growing up in gilded isolation, Judy endured ear-pinning surgery to erase her uncanny Gable resemblance and whispers from maids who knew too much. At 15, she saw her uncle Clark once, unaware he was her father. Only on the eve of marriage did friends confirm the rumor, shattering decades of gaslighting. Judy forged her own path, soap opera roles, producing gigs, a psychology degree, before detonating Hollywood's longest-kept secret in her memoir, Uncommon Knowledge. "I was illegitimate," she wrote, "but never illegitimate in God's eyes." Merl Oberon. Estelle Merl. Thompson's first secret arrived before she could speak. The birth certificate filed in Bombay, 1911, listed her mother as Charlotte Selby, but Charlotte was really her Eurasian grandmother. The true mother, Constance Selby, had been a pregnant 12-year-old, and the child's white railway engineer father vanished across the Raj. To dodge scandal, Charlotte raised Merle as a younger sister, drilling her to call dark-skinned relatives servants whenever British officers visited. Teachers whispered that the dreamy girl was probably a love child, and playground bullies hissed Chi-Chi, the Anglo-Indian slur for half-breed bastard. At 17, Merle followed a colonial film scout to London, then reinvented herself yet again in Hollywood as Tasmanian-born Merl Oberon, daughter of an aristocratic army hero killed on safari. Studio publicists dyed her backstory snow white. Merle herself insisted on face powder mixed with bleach to blur her mestiza complexion. But terror of exposure hardened into drive. She rehearsed accents until dawn, endured facial scar surgeries after a 1937 crash, and fought for the role of Kathy in Wuthering Heights, earning eternal stardom. Off-camera, she paid her grandmother a salary as housekeeper, the only safe way to keep family close. Only after her death in 1979 did released Raj census rolls prove the gossip true. The revelation recast her legend, not as society's imposter, but as cinema's ultimate self-made phoenix, a woman who defied both race laws and the branding of bastard to write her own lineage in light, Eartha Kitt. She arrived in 1927 on a cotton plantation outside North South Carolina. "A pickaninny nobody wanted," whispered the sharecroppers. Her mother, Annie Mae Keith, was a Cherokee African sharecropper. Her father, by every family account, was the white son of the plantation owner who raped her mother and promptly disowned the child. Eartha's pale skin made her too yellow for the black family that took her in. She was beaten, half-starved, and traded among relatives like spare furniture. At 7, she was put on a train to Harlem, alone, because a new stepfather refused to raise the bastard. She survived by scavenging trash cans and stealing fruit, yet even then she could mimic sirens, birds, languages, sounds that felt like magic spells against cruelty. Dance classes at the Catherine Dunham Company gave her a stage name and, crucially, a passport overseas, where Paris nightclubs crowned her a cosmopolitan kitten. When she purred Santa Baby in 1953, America swooned, then blacklisted her in 1968 for denouncing the Vietnam War in front of Lady Bird Johnson. Kitt shrugged. She had been exiled since birth. She toured Europe, learned 5 more languages, and returned in triumph as Batman's Catwoman. "I'm a child without a country," she told a reporter, "but the world is my stage." Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Jean Dandridge began life in 1922, Cleveland as the unplanned daughter of would-be evangelist Ruby Butler and itinerant cabinet maker Cyril Dandridge, who vanished before Dorothy could speak his name. Ruby, terrified of the illegitimate brand, hit the road with a song and dance act, leaving her babies to the iron rule of Geneva Williams, a lover who beat discipline into tiny legs until they bled. Dorothy's classroom was the back seat of a broken Ford, as the Wonder Children played black churches for pennies during the Depression. Hollywood seemed salvation, but only for servants' roles, casting calls stamped "No Bastards" and "No Colored" in the same silent ink. She broke through with Carmen Jones, the first black woman Oscar nominee for Best Actress, yet still entered hotels by freight elevator. Studio bosses offered stardom in exchange for silence about her past and affairs. She took the roles but never gagged the pain. Pills numbed the loneliness, debts piled up, and the industry that once measured her hips finally measured her coffin in 1965. Even in death, the illegitimate girl exposed segregation's hypocrisy. America could adore her voice, but never erase the word bastard the census once stamped beside her name. Jack Nicholson. For 37 years, Jack Nicholson believed his mother was June, an ethereal showgirl 9 years his senior, and that doting Ethel May was his grandmother. In reality, June was a terrified 17-year-old who'd gotten pregnant by a married man in 1936. The family concealed the scandal by switching identities. Growing up in working-class New Jersey, Jackie felt the secrecy without knowing the story. He was forbidden to ask genealogy questions, and neighborhood kids snickered about loose women in his house. The anger boiled into rebellion, expulsions, bar fights, motorcycle races, until Hollywood noticed the feral grin. He was filming Chinatown, a movie about twisted family secrets, when Time magazine fact-checkers uncovered his own. June was his mother. His sister mom had died, taking the father's name to her grave. Nicholson absorbed the shock with a laconic shrug, but privately talked of walls collapsing. From that day, he played outsiders with raw authenticity. McMurphy, Gittes, the Joker, men furious at buried truths. Asked later if he felt betrayed, he smiled the smile that sells tickets. Hell, I'd call it a terrific act of love. They gave the bastard a shot at life. The stigma that once demanded silence became the fuel for a 5-decade reign as Hollywood's supreme rebel king, Josephine Baker. Frida Josephine MacDonald was born in a St. Louis shanty in 1906 to laundress Carrie MacDonald and an itinerant drummer who vanished before she learned to walk, a stain the birth register called illegitimate. Hunger shaped her earliest memories, sorting coal from railroad tracks, scavenging wilted lettuce from white folks' trash, and dodging stones hurled by boys chanting, "Bastard pickaninny." At 8, she was hired as a live-in maid. When the mistress locked leftovers away, Josephine danced beside the dinner table until guests slipped her rolls in pity. A runaway at 13, she joined a black vaudeville troupe, sleeping on train benches and scrubbing floors between shows, but soaking in every shimmy step the older dancers would teach. New York's 1921 reviews still shoved her to the chorus's back row. Too poor, too dark, too illegitimate to front a stage, yet audiences craned for the frenetic girl whose grin mocked every rule that tried to cage her. Paris, 1925. Feathers, saxophones, and Josephine in a banana skirt burned away the stigma in one night of roaring applause. French critics hailed her Black Venus, and for the first time, she ate in the front of restaurants that would not have served her as a maid. Yet each ovation reminded her of the little girl barred from legitimacy. She funneled fortune into a rainbow tribe of 12 adopted orphans to prove family could be chosen. In World War II, she curried Allied secrets inside sheet music. During U.S. civil rights marches, she spoke of a nation that once branded her birth unlawful. When a cerebral hemorrhage claimed her in 1975, the French government gave a state funeral, the illegitimate child from Missouri, escorted to the Pantheon by legionnaires. "I improvised my life," she had said, and every broken rule became a spotlight. Lou Teligan. Isidore Louis Bernard Edmund van Domelen entered the Dutch world in 1883 as the love child of a West Indies Army lieutenant and a widowed seamstress, the sort of scandal that could ruin 2 families, so both simply denied him. Parish gossip labeled him unwettig, unlawful, and schoolmasters thrashed the barrack brat who dared dream beyond a carpenter's bench. Lou found refuge in traveling theater troupes, where grease paint erased the name society refused him. By 20, he was starring opposite Sarah Bernhardt. Parisian tabloids gasped at the cougar romance, never guessing the orphaned boy clung to the grande dame because she was the first person powerful enough to claim him publicly. Hollywood imported Teligan in 1915, selling him as the Continental Valentino, with profiles rumored to launch wars. Yet inside satin dressing gowns, he hid the fear of exposure. Studio contracts barred mention of his illegitimate birth, and interviewers who pressed were met with a fencing sword's glint. Ill-fated marriages, to diva Geraldine Farrar, then actress Nina Romano, soured when bankruptcy and facial burns from a hotel room fire eroded the matinee idol facade. Cancer followed, but doctors kept the diagnosis secret, telling friends he was just tired. On October 29, 1934, he powdered his ravaged face, stood before a mirror in a Hollywood mansion, and drove sewing shears into his heart 7 times, an actor writing his own final curtain when no studio would cast him. Newsboys barked suicide of forgotten star. Only a few lines noted he had been born without lawful name or inheritance. Yet film historians now see Teligan's swashbuckling on celluloid as proof that an illegitimate child could redraw a destiny frame by flickering frame, even if the off-screen battle left deeper scars than any prop sword. Niels Ather. He was born in 1897 Copenhagen without a wedding ring to bless the cradle, just a hurried promise from Swedish cavalryman Anton Ather that he would marry the girl later. For Niels, the damage was done. Danish midwives inked Udlagt Fader Ukent, father not named, on the parish roll before sending the baby to strangers in a hilly farmhouse. Loneliness taught him to disappear into characters, first a wide-eyed page on tiny Gothenburg stages, later a brooding prince for director Moritz Stiller. Hollywood imported the male Greta Garbo in 1927 and handed him silk kimono roles, Javanese princes, Chinese warlords, because an accent and ocean-deep eyes could sell any forbidden desire. Inside, Ather nursed scars. Directors barked about bastard backgrounds, columnists mocked his unmarried parents, and studio moralists suggested a lavender marriage to hush rumors that he loved men. He accepted, briefly, then watched his contract collapse when he refused a producer's advances and was quietly blacklisted for temperament. Exiled to B Pictures and finally back to Sweden, Ather painted storm-lashed seascapes no gallery would buy. Yet every frame he ever stole, from wild orchids to the bitter tea of General Yen, still flickers with the ache of a child who fought his way from a Foster barn loft to Hollywood Boulevard's Walk of Fame, daring a world obsessed with bloodlines to love him anyway. Morton Selton. Society pages called him Morton Selton, but backstage gossips preferred a nastier label, the King's Byblow. Born Morton. Richard Stubbs in 1860. Wiltshire, he carried the lifelong rumor that his real father was the then Prince of Wales, later Edward VII, a titillating whisper neither palace nor parish ever denied. The taunt shadowed him through boarding school, where classmates recited nursery rhymes about royal sins. Rather than wilt, Stubbs fled to America at 18, rechristened himself Selton, and attacked Broadway with a courtier's bow and a bastard's fury, 25 smash productions in 3 decades. In an age when illegitimacy could bar a man from polite drawing rooms, Selton relished playing dukes, kings, and generals, his impeccable diction a daily retort to the slur unlawful. Hollywood beckoned at 60, gifting him patrician parts that let him finally inhabit the lineage he'd been denied. Lord Burleigh in Fire Over England, King Alfred in The Ghost Goes West, an aged monarch in The Thief of Baghdad. It was on that Technicolor set, propped upright by pillows after 2 surgeries, that Selton's heart surrendered in July 1939. Cameras kept rolling. Director Michael Powell later swore the old actor's final look into the lens felt like a curtain call for a life no scandal could break. He died without heirs, but left reels of celluloid proof that birth status is a footnote, not a fate. From whispered palace intrigue to desert fantasy epics, Morton Selton's journey turns a cruel Victorian punchline into a standing ovation for self-invented nobility. Behind every glamorous close-up, these stars carried secret birth certificates stamped illicit. Their bravery turned scandal into legacy. Let their stories remind us that identity is forged, not assigned. If you felt their struggle ignite hope, like, share, and subscribe, then join us next time as we uncover hidden Hollywood truths.